The upstroke escape picking motion is one of the wrist's core motions. You'll recognize it by the path the pick travels. The downstroke begins up in the air and follows a diagonal path down into the strings to play the note. When the downstroke finishes, you'll find that the point of the pick is trapped between the string you're playing and the next higher string. This makes the downstroke the trapped pick stroke in the motion. The upstroke is the reverse. It starts out trapped and rises into the air along the reverse diagonal path while playing the note. When it finishes, the point of the pick will not be between two strings at all, but instead in the air adjacent to the strings, away from the body of the guitar. This is the escaped position. Since this happens on the upstroke, that's how we came up with the name. The reason this is important is because it's during the escape stroke that you can switch strings. Phrases that work with an upstroke escape motion are those where the final note on the string is an upstroke. Upstroke escape, lightly supinated wrist picking motion. Boy, that just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? We're going to learn how to do it. It's common, it's easy. It's the picking motion used by great players like Mike Stern, Mika Tuska, and of course the great Eric Johnson. You can see the upstroke escape trajectory quite clearly here. The whole hand moving side to side along a deviation pathway. And in theory, it's pretty simple, right? You just use this sideways motion of your wrist to go back and forth. How hard could that be, right? Well, it's actually kind of tricky because a lot of people, you will hear comments that this motion isn't comfortable or it's weird and I don't know how to do it. And a lot of people try to do this and they get their forearm turning around, which is also can be confusing because you're like, well, I know I should be able to do this, but I can't. So I'm going to give you some really simple instructions for doing this. This is, first and foremost, an upstroke escape motion, by which I mean this is a picking motion where the downstrokes are trapped in between the strings and the upstrokes escape or move away from the guitar's body. It looks like this. There's your trapped stroke. There's your escaped upstroke. So the picking motion is angled. It's effectively slanted, and of course we're using a small amount of a pick slant to match that escape trajectory so that we get nice smooth downstrokes and upstrokes so that our angle of attack is the same on downstroke and the upstroke. And the good news is, depending upon the kind of pick grip you use, that pick slant aspect kind of takes care of itself. In this case, I'm using a pad side grip where effectively the pick is kind of perpendicular to the plane that wrist deviation operates in, so that any tilt that I make in my arm is going to also affect the pick and give me that perpendicular angle of attack to smooth out my downstrokes and my upstrokes. Anyway, that's a lot of theory. How about some practice? Let's do it. Take the watch band area of your forearm and place it on the strings. Now, drop your wrist extension. Don't flex. Don't go so far that you look like this. Just go straight. If you're flexed, look what happens to the wrist. It's deviating this way. I can't go anymore this way. And I want to be able to upstroke escape, but I can't. So what do? I turn my arm. It's the only way to get out. Well, we don't want that. We want a straight wrist so that I can actually move a little bit to the side to escape. Now, remove fingers from the equation of body contact. Don't allow the fingers to hit the body. We want to be able to move smoothly in this direction without scraping our knuckles on the strings. That only makes sense, right? And finally, set your range of motion to the center. Now, you might think this is a centered range of motion, but aha, the wrist is tricky this way. The radial direction of wrist motion has less range of motion than the ulnar side. I can go much further this way than I can this way. So this is not actually a centered wrist motion. This isn't the center point. That's the center point, where my thumb is kind of more or less in line with this bone in my arm here. That's roughly, let's just call it roughly, the center point of the wrist's range of motion. So then a centered deviation wrist motion would look more like this. Now, of course, we've got our pivot point here on the watch band area. And now we've got all these ingredients. What do I do next? I tilt ever so slightly. Why? Because we want to generate an upstroke escape path. We want the picking motion to actually move in such a way that upstrokes leave the plane of the strings and downstrokes stay buried. And when you do this, you have achieved perfectly smooth and easy to do, side to side, but on a tilt, deviation picking motion. Cracking the Code viewers, you wouldn't think that teaching somebody to move a guitar pick back and forth in a straight line would be that big of a deal. I mean, how hard could it be? Then you probably don't want to know how many years we spent trying to figure out what all the different picking motions are in common use. How many of those are wrist motion? How many types of wrist motion there are? How those types are affected by changes in your pick grip and your arm position, and finally, how we could arrive at a series of step-by-step instructions to actually do these things. Well, the great news is the Pick Slanting Primer has those instructions. In addition to everything you need to know about how guitar picks work, how to hold them, and how to execute popular picking motions like wrist motion, including the common ones used by players like John McLaughlin, Al Di Meola, Eric Johnson, and Mike Stern, and the less common ones used by players like Albert Lee, Eddie Van Halen, and Steve Morse. And that's the trick. We sometimes like to think that there's no right way to play the guitar. And it's true, there really are lots of right ways to play the guitar. But you know what else there's lots of? Wrong ways. And you can either do what we did and bang your head against the wall for the rest of your life trying to figure out the difference, or you can figure out that difference right now with the Pick Slanting Primer. Stop the struggle. Stop it. Notice I'm keeping my range of motion down here. I'm not up here. Not that there's anything specifically wrong with that, but that's not the motion we're going for here. We're going for this slightly ulnarized, let's coin a term there, slightly ulnarized range of motion down here. You'll see great players play this way. Andy Wood, for example. You can see that ulnar offset very often in his playing. So we have that little bit of a tilt to our forearm, and we have this slightly ulnarized range of motion with, again, our watch band pivot point. Okay, now let's talk about the trajectory of the motion. This is a wrist motion, so the motion originates at this point here. And if you observe it from this perspective, it looks like it traces a little semicircle. That's fine. There's no rule of guitar picking that says you have to pick straight up and down or parallel with the pickups. There's not even any rule that says your pickups go straight up and down, and mine don't. So your guitar might be pointed all sorts of ways. With your headstock angle, your approach angle could be different. These things are all moving around, but what never moves is this. Your wrist is always connected to your forearm at this point, and so it traces a semicircle, in this case a slightly ulnarized semicircle, based on that point of origin. When you look at this motion through the magnet, then what you're looking at is like a disc on its edge. You won't see that curve, you'll see what looks like mostly a straight line. So the pick appears to go straight into the string and then straight out. That's what this motion should look like when it's done correctly. It's a straight shot in and a straight shot out. It's not a very effortful movement. It should feel smooth. The problem happens when you look down at your hand or you look through the magnet and you see this. This bouncing movement, this is the bugaboo of string hopping that we have created, perhaps, or perhaps scaremongered a little bit in cracking the code, that everybody wants to know, oh, I might have a string hopping problem. Well, some people do, and what that basically means is you've learned that motion. You've learned this bouncy motion of the hand. Now, string hopping, or let's say curved motions, aren't all bad. The double escape pick stroke is a curved motion, and it's super useful, and you can use it to play even very rapid things. The problem with the string hopping motion is twofold. It uses the same muscles, so it builds up tension, and also it's very vertical. You're going into the strings and out of the strings at a steeper incline than you really want to, and it looks like this. You're basically asking the pick to change direction really rapidly, and it doesn't feel smooth. The practical implication of this is that you may experience a speed limit in your ability to do this, and you also may experience arm tension. If you experience any of those things, and of course if you look down and you see the pick doing that, or if you film yourself and you see the pick doing that, then we've got a problem. We've got to deal with it. The way that I deal with this problem, you can see it in the fast clips that we're filming, it's the rest stroke. In other words, when the pick goes down into the strings, the trapped stroke bottoms out against the next higher string, in this case the B string. And then the upstroke just pulls right back out again. Now you would think this would feel weird to do this, but actually I do it all the time without even really knowing it. In fact, it was only after filming myself to do this instructional stuff that I even noticed that I was doing it as extensively as I was. You know who else does this rest stroke thing? Eric Johnson. I know we looked at this before, but check out those rest strokes. You can see the pick bottoming out into the next higher string. So, if you find that when you try to do this motion, it doesn't feel smooth, or you can't go fast, or you experience tension, and you see this bouncing appearance, one way you can train yourself out of that is to think about actually physically contacting the next lower string with your pick stroke, like this, or this. You don't have to apply a lot of force. These motions should all feel smooth and relatively effortless. Instead, you're just continuing to push with the pick until you hit that lower string. Now, if you do that, and you notice a little bit of motion at the end of the pick stroke, where the pick hits the string and then maybe almost appears to slide up the string a little bit, that's fine. That's just the physics of the tapered pick design, of course, that we've looked at. And not only that, but if you notice that there's a little bit of this and it tends to go away as you get faster, that's also fine. A lot of players use the double escape motion when they're playing more slowly and then transition to a more single escape type of pathway as they get faster. And again, Andy Wood is a great example of this. We had him play these Paul Gilbert sixes patterns at different speeds. At the slower speeds, you can absolutely see the double escape trajectory. And then when he speeds up, we looked at this one before, it's gone. It's just a straight shot into and out of the strings. So the rest stroke is a natural consequence of a trapped pick stroke. It's actually almost a challenge to make a trapped pick stroke that doesn't rest stroke, at least occasionally, even if you're not hitting it really hard all the time. You don't have to do that, but just by following a pathway that goes into the string. You're probably going to contact that next higher string every so often, and when done correctly, it doesn't produce any sound. You don't even feel it either. In fact, some people have suggested that it might even serve as an enhancement to playing smoothly because the string stops the motion of the pick for you, so then all you have to do is come back. I don't know if that's true or not, but what I can say is that you can use this as a training device to try and get these single escape motions to move in what appears to be a linear fashion from this perspective. And there you have it. Wrist deviation, upstroke, escape picking motion with a lightly supinated forearm. To go, please. Cracking the Code viewers, you want to get better at picking technique, and we'd like to help. You just watched an awesome new chapter of the Pick Slanting Primer, which now includes everything you need to know about pick grip, picking motion, string switching mechanics like pick slanting, and how to take all this stuff and organize your lines on the fretboard to give your picking hand the easiest possible time of it. How do you get access to all this amazing stuff? Well, it's so easy. Just head on over to troygrady.com. You can grab the Pick Slanting Primer as a download product, or even better, you can check out a subscription and you'll get access to the primer and everything else on the website. How cool is that? It could be 1 month, 2 months, no big deal. Get in, get better, get out. As always, it is your support that keeps us going, and we are eternally grateful that you watch our stuff and enjoy it, and most importantly, get better. So if you have a moment, head on over to troygrady.com and check us out. And as always, thank you for watching Cracking the Code.